they're playing our tune. Morning Report, Gyles Beckford and Mike Hosking with the honours for another day. And today, live free-to-air rugby will be as scarce as hen's teeth, at least for the next 3 years. We'll talk to Richie Guy, the Prime Minister, and heaps of other people very shortly. The pre-budget statement is out today. We'll look at the implications of that. Wayne Goss is in trouble in Queensland. And we look at the Iowa primaries. Here's Catriona McCleod.
Good morning. There's widespread anger this morning that All Black matches will no longer be shown live on free-to-air television. Sky has bought the rights to show most major rugby matches, including All Black tests for the next 3 years. The games will be shown on TVNZ, which is a shareholder in Sky, with a delay of at least 1 hour. Some areas, such as the West Coast, Taranaki, Northland, King Country, parts of the Bay of Plenty and Nelson, can't get good Sky reception, and some residents say that rugby won't be the same. They say if they try to watch the match delayed, someone will always spoil it by revealing the score, and it'll be a waste of time watching. The Rugby Union has defended its position, saying it would have lost players to the World Rugby Corporation or to Super League if it hadn't signed with News Corporation. And there'll be more on this story after the news. The British Prime Minister John Major is warning the public of the possibility of further IRA bombing attacks. The warning came in his first speech to Parliament since the IRA ended its 17-month-old ceasefire last Saturday when it bombed London's Docklands district, killing 2 people. Mr Major says the IRA doesn't have a shred of an excuse for the explosion when all-party negotiations were clearly in sight. He says the bombing shows the British government's caution about the IRA is justified.
I must say to the House, this may not be the last such atrocity. More may follow, both here in the mainland and in Northern Ireland, if the IRA ceasefire is not renewed. We will do all we can to prevent them and to catch those responsible. The protection of the public will remain our first priority.
Mr Major says no one took more risks for peace than his government, even though it understood the IRA had not committed itself to a permanent ceasefire. The government's budget policy statement today is not expected to stir the financial markets. The budget policy statement sets the framework for the next budget, and our economics correspondent says no major new initiatives are expected today because the government has little room to manoeuvre.
In a self-imposed discipline, the government's promised to only cut taxes at the time when public debt goes below 30% of New Zealand's gross domestic product. And after announcing a spending and tax package worth billions of dollars in December, any more big spend-ups would push the government over the 30% target. But details of the tax cuts won't be announced today. They've been put off till next week. Instead, today's statement from the minister will focus on where $300 million worth of new initiatives this year will be spent. The new spending is expected to be shared out among family support payments, education and other areas such as scientific research. This is Bronwyn Evans.
2 people are dead after a tramping accident in Arthurs Pass National Park yesterday. It's believed they were swept away while crossing a river. Claire Sylvester reports.
Police say the man and woman were seen clinging to a pole in the middle of the Hordern River by a group of trampers at about 3 o'clock yesterday afternoon. The group went for help, but when they returned there was no sign of the pair. A search by police and DOC staff was mounted and the bodies were later recovered in the river. Christchurch police expect to release details about the trampers' identities this morning. In Christchurch, Claire Sylvester.
There's a claim this morning that the amount of court-ordered compensation for workplace accidents is increasing. Kiri Coughlin reports that the trend is of judges being concerned that ACC payouts are too low.
Recent court cases have seen one company fined $60,000 after a worker was injured with $40,000 to go to the man, while another must pay $30,000 to an injured employee. Victoria University senior law lecturer John Miller says he believes the amount of the fines increasing because judges see the payment available to people under ACC as meagre and are using fines to compensate them. Labour's employment spokesperson Steve Mahari agrees and wants an urgent overhaul of ACC. The Council of Trade Unions is backing his call but says judges should be commended for recognising the inadequacy of the accident compensation scheme. This is Kiri Coughlin.
Big cuts are being made to school bus services in the Dunedin area. From the end of June, 25 subsidised bus services linking the city with Mosgiel, Port Chalmers and South Coast townships will be phased out. About 1,200 pupils from 14 secondary schools are affected. Ministry of Education spokesperson Michael Deaker says all the contracts expired last year and the ministry's policy is not to provide school buses where public transport exists. But he says to help offset the added cost and inconvenience to parents, the ministry will provide transitional funding of $820,000 for schools to fund an alternative. Transrail continues its defence in the Morgan Jones case in the High Court in Wellington this morning. Transrail is accused of criminal nuisance after 7-year-old Morgan Jones fell from the Coastal Pacific Express in North Canterbury in 1994 when a handrail gave way. Merle Noland reports.
Yesterday, Transrail's lawyer submitted it was not criminally responsible for Morgan Jones' injuries. He said the company could only be found guilty of criminal nuisance if it was found it had not been maintaining all necessary safety standards. The first defence witness, Anthony Thomas, General Manager of Mechanical Engineering, strongly defended the safety standards, inspections and maintenance systems. Transrail will also be calling 2 overseas rail safety experts to say it was doing all it should to maintain safety. This is Mel Noland.
An Auckland minister says he doesn't regret the vandalising of a billboard of a naked man next to his church, even though legal action could follow. The Ponsonby billboard displays a naked man's bare buttocks and contains a message about safe sex and homosexual relationships. It angered nearby churchgoers who painted over the billboard, then ripped off a section they found offensive. The advertising company responsible for the ad says it wasn't intended to be offensive and there's no excuse for the vandalism. It says it will take legal action. The minister of St John's Methodist Church, Paulo Ierico, says he's prepared to face the consequences.
I'm quite prepared to, if the court says you got to pay compensation for the action, then we're quite prepared to do that. That's not saying that we regret what we have done.
Paulo Ierico of St John's Methodist Church. Meanwhile, the City Council has said the billboard should be shifted to a commercially zoned area. Violence has flared again in Sri Lanka on the eve of the first match in the Cricket World Cup. At least 24 Tamil civilians have been killed in a village in the east of the country and more than 25 injured. A Sri Lankan Tamil politician blames armed forces for the deaths. He says he's been told the army broke into houses, pulled people out and fired indiscriminately. Army sources have privately confirmed the attack and say it's believed to be in retaliation for the killing of 2 soldiers. And there's still no explanation as to why New Zealand cricket wasn't informed of a crucial World Cup meeting in Calcutta yesterday. The meeting, involving the 11 other competing nations, voted 6-5 in favour of stripping the West Indies and Australia of 2 points for refusing to play Sri Lanka in Colombo. New Zealand manager Gran Alabaster says New Zealand's absence was a critical oversight by the World Cup organisers. He says had New Zealand been represented, the vote would have been tied, and he has expressed regret to the Australians. That's the news.
During Into the Night this week, Bookshelf starts a new 12-part series, Inside Mr. Enderby by Anthony Burgess, a black comedy tracing the literary, amorous and digestive misfortunes of a hapless poet. Wednesday night's play is a look at a celebrated Freudian case of repressed sexual desire in Dora, a case of hysteria. Don't forget that every night at 6:45 you can hear a featured interview from Kim Hill's show that day. Into the Night, from 6 o'clock weeknights on National Radio.
Now the forecast from Met Service to midnight Thursday, Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel Bay of Plenty in the Central Plateau. Fine periods with isolated showers today, rain tomorrow evening. Waitomo to Wellington, including Taihape, occasional showers clearing overnight, rain tomorrow afternoon, easing to scattered showers at night. Gisborne to Wairarapa mostly fine today. Brief rain for Wairarapa this afternoon and again late tomorrow. Marlborough and Nelson, rain clearing this afternoon but returning briefly tomorrow afternoon. Buller Westland and Fiordland, periods of rain or squally showers. Snow down to 500 metres about Fiordland late tomorrow. Canterbury and Otago, fine periods today, scattered showers until evening, some heavy and possibly thundery with hail. Mainly fine tomorrow, but brief rain for Otago. Southland, scattered rain clearing this evening, some showers tomorrow. And the Chathams, rain clearing tomorrow morning. Now a look at the main centre forecasts for the day. In Auckland, patchy morning rain, light winds, a maximum of 26. In Wellington, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes, a maximum of 23. In Christchurch, cloud clearing, light winds, a maximum of 22. And for Dunedin, cloudy at times, northeast breezes and 19 degrees. It's 7:09.
And you're listening to Morning Report with Mike Hosking and Gyles Beckford. The end of an era for New Zealand rugby. The announcement that Sky Television has secured the live television rights to All Black Test matches for the next 3 years has created howls of protest around the country. Sports correspondent Stephen Hewson reports.
Get Sky installed this week and catch television's best coverage of the World Cup for just $25. Phone before midnight.
Sky Network's advertising campaign promoting its World Cup cricket coverage looks set to be overtaken by the network's latest signing, live test match coverage of the All Blacks. The 3-year deal means TVNZ will carry only delayed coverage of future All Black test matches. Tests will be screened on Sky's pay channel and then screened at least an hour later on TVNZ. The deal affects the All Blacks Tri-Series test matches against Australia and South Africa and the tests against the Springboks when the All Blacks tour South Africa in August and September, as well as the tours here by Scotland and Western Samoa. Also affected is the Super 12 International Provincial Series and the National Provincial Championship. About 200,000 households currently subscribe to Sky Television. About 1.1 million households in New Zealand have television sets, and of those, 800,000 are capable of receiving Sky. Subscription to Sky costs about $500 a year, with a one-off initial cost of $50. The deal has created uproar from rugby fans around the country. West Coast viewers can't receive Sky or TV3, and a bartender at the Greymouth RSA, Robbie Byrne, says fans are organising a boycott of the broadcasting fee because they can no longer see rugby and league matches live on TV.
They're very upset at the fact that all these other conglomerates can grab up all these big sporting events, which normally is free to air, and everybody else in the country can get them by going to pay TV, and they can't get anything here.
There was a similar angry response at Wellington's Prince of Wales Hotel.
I reckon the guys that can't afford it should be able to watch it on live on the other TVs themselves.
We've got Sky ourselves, in that respect doesn't really bother me, but I feel sorry for a lot of the people out there that haven't actually got access to Sky.
I don't think it's fair, really. It's important for all New Zealanders to see that game because it brings the country together.
It's not a game for the rich only. There's a lot of poor people that can't afford Sky, but they're the ones that just as much enjoy the game.
I wonder about how TVNZ, with their revenue source, couldn't compete with Sky. Oh, well, never mind. Have to watch golf, I guess.
Broadcasting Minister Maurice Williamson says the news is disappointing for those who can't have or can't get Sky, but he says it has to be recognised that rugby has changed from an amateur code to a professional one.
Most New Zealanders missed what happened. They were all caught up in the euphoria of people like Jonah Lomu and lots of other rugby players being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars wages, and even the sort of coaches and managers and assistant Orange boys are now starting to get paid. And the big question has to be asked, where does the money come from? Because free-to-air was never going to, even if you had massive quantities more of advertising within a free-to-air game, and already we cop lots of complaints through this office as Minister of Broadcasting about the level of advertising. Even if free-to-air had increased significantly its advertising, it wouldn't have been able to sort of generate the sums of money that are involved in this.
Maurice Williamson says the deal is sensible and says upset fans should take up their concerns with the NZRFU or Sky Television. Other sporting codes are likely to face a similar situation in future, and New Zealand Cricket Chief Executive Chris Doig says he welcomes the move.
I don't think it's a bad thing. I think that, competition keeps people honest, and, competition in that particular field is a good thing for both for the sport and I think for Television New Zealand.
So now rugby fans face their own test. Just how important live test match coverage is to rugby followers will be determined by the numbers who sign with Sky, guaranteeing themselves a lounge seat at All Black tests for the next 3 years. For Morning Report, Stephen Hewson.
13 after 7 to Richie Guy and the Prime Minister in just a second, but fears for a missing rescue helicopter in Canterbury this morning. Police say the Mount Hutt helicopter was sent into the Rakaya Gorge last night to rescue 4 trampers stuck in high waters. The inspector in charge of this, Dave Laurie, says they haven't heard from the chopper since. We're working on that. We'll bring you some details shortly. So to the New Zealand Football Union Chairman, Rugby Football Union Chairman Richie Guy, good morning.
Good morning.
When you struck the deal with Rupert Murdoch, was free-to-air access discussed at all?
Free-to-air access, of course, was always a very thorny problem for us, but very obviously we were not going to get very large sums of money if we put free-to-air tags on. It's like me selling a car and then telling you that in 6 months you can only sell it to my cousin or something of that nature, because it completely would have distorted the market, and the sums we achieved we would never have got.
What sort of difference are we talking about?
Oh, I can't tell you exactly figures, but I would say probably it might have been worth about 20%.
20? Are we talking millions?
20% of what we achieved.
Yes, but we're talking millions of dollars difference to the rugby union.
Obviously, very many millions. I mean, because as soon as you put an impediment on it, you distort the market.
Did you think at the time that this would become a problem?
Well, if we looked at the market forces that were prevailing at the time, we had got to a position in terms of television in New Zealand where a mix, about 50-50, was on Sky and TVNZ. And market forces and the demand of the public would, we felt, ensure that the matches were on free-to-air. You
had a valuable car, though, didn't you, to use your analogy?
Oh, yes, very valuable. But don't forget, too, that we needed to get as much money as we got. In fact, in this coming year, we are still budgeting for a modest loss in 96, despite the fact that we achieved such large sums of money.
A deal's been done in South Africa too, hasn't it, for pay-per-view?
I understand so, but I've only had scant reports on that. I'm not aware of the detail.
Do you know what's happened in Australia?
I don't believe there's anything being finalised in Australia at this point.
Would they be looking at pay-per-view there as well?
I've got no idea. I mean, the market in New Zealand is our concern. The market in those other countries is not, other than a peripheral overview, and obviously what happens in one country tends to happen in another.
Have a listen to this. This is some opinion of New Zealanders talking on Talkback last night.
It's a day of shame. It is. And you feel so desperate.
I just personally think it sucks. So I just can't believe that Richie Guy had the right to sell it, you know? Because, I mean, he's only the head of the rugby union. It's the grassroots people that pay for the rugby union and keep him in his job. Without club levies, without support, people going to games, paying the 10 to blimmin' $50 sometimes to get to a test, where would they be?
It's all right for the richies that can afford Sky. I can't, number one. And number two, if I could, I wouldn't be blackmailed into getting their rotten thing. I wouldn't pay them the money on principle now.
Where public funding through the Hillary Commission and the Lotteries Commission and other government agencies go into a sport, then in a sense the public of New Zealand have an investment in that sport, and it ought to come back to them free to air.
So that was from Talkback last night, Richie Guy. What do you say to those people?
Well, there's a lot of emotive statements there. For example, the New Zealand Rugby Union has the right to operate the game. We have the mandate to make the necessary arrangements. If we hadn't made the arrangements we'd made, you wouldn't be seeing All Blacks. People wouldn't be sitting around arguing about whether or not they can watch rugby on television. They wouldn't be watching it at all. There wouldn't be an All Black team.
Well, that's not strictly true. There would be a team of some description in the World Rugby Corporation, wouldn't there?
I beg your pardon?
People want to watch Jonah Lomu, don't they?
Well, that's correct.
And Jonah Lomu would be playing rugby, whether he's called an All Black or part of the World Corporation or Rupert Murdoch Circus or whatever, wouldn't he?
Or possibly Super League, or possibly playing in Japan. Those that have gone to Japan are lost. There's also, they could have gone to other markets overseas, because the market in Europe was much more expensive than the market here.
What about the PR side of it? One comment from a caller there was talking about the grassroots, the people who, A, keep you in a job, but more importantly, support the game, and have done so for generations in this country.
We've got to correct some of the statements made there too. No money at all flows from the club player up through the system to the New Zealand Rugby Union. Many millions are distributed downwards from the New Zealand Rugby to the provincial unions and thence through to the clubs. So the New Zealand Rugby Union has always been self-funding. It's the only sport in the country where we don't charge a levy on the participants or the club members. So money only goes downwards, not upwards. And I mean, we are now in an era where the sport has gone professional. It had to go professional. There wasn't an option. And at the end of the day, the consumer will pay. Whether they pay it in one form or another, it makes no difference. The consumer will still pay.
All right, couple of quick ones. You happy with the TVNZ deal?
Well, I'm very happy because everyone in the country can still watch the All Blacks. We've got added bonuses in there. In the past, or no, not in the past, at all times, we've owned this television signal in this country. Matches played overseas in Australia or South Africa or anywhere else were owned by the country in which the match was played. Under that system, Sky, for example, could have brought the rights to matches in South Africa just as they did in 1992. In 1992, the matches were broadcast on Sky. Under the present arrangement for the next 3 years, all of those matches, Australia, South Africa and New Zealand, are all going to be seen, all the major matches will be seen on television.
Does the threat of legislation worry you?
It does, because if that was to come to pass, obviously it'll distort the market.
Thanks for your time. That's the chairman of the New Zealand Rugby Football Union, Richie Guy. Well, you'll remember the Prime Minister was on the programme last week and we asked him about the possibility of pay-per-view. He, at the time, was upset at the possibility. He's back with us. Good morning.
Good morning.
You still upset?
Yes, but I'm pleased they've made some progress. I listened to Richie Guy there. The simple fact is that the rugby union gambled. They gambled on how much rugby, that's All Black rugby, would be shown on television. They sold their rights for a very large sum of money to the Murdoch Empire, and they gambled that someone would make a deal that would show All Black rugby on television. They've been partly successful in that gamble, and a significant amount will be, but a significant amount won't be. And there's various areas in New Zealand, of course, can't see Sky at all.
So what are you going to do about it?
Well, as I said, you referred to the earlier interviews. I said then that I hope they'd have the wit to find a solution, and they've found a solution that at least goes part of the way to restoring the opportunity for all New Zealanders. And it does restore the opportunity for all New Zealanders, in fact, to watch All Black rugby. The grouch out in the community listening to your earlier clips from talkback shows and the like is that, of course, it's all delayed. I was hopeful, frankly, and I would have thought it would have been wise for both Sky and for television and for the rugby union to have at least the New Zealand test matches all go live. I can't quite see the purpose of this 1 hour delay.
Having said that, why should they? If I've got the money to buy a product and I own it, what on earth am I doing wanting to help my competitors?
Very simple reason. From the rugby union's perspective, they need to maintain their very high profile in the minds of New Zealanders to retain workers at club level, new players coming in the schools and in the clubs, so that they sustain their position as a dominant force in world rugby. I mean, this isn't a one-sided deal. I mean, the rugby union isn't there as some great gift to the rest of the nation. They organise rugby on behalf of these sports-minded rugby-playing New Zealanders. And there's thousands of mums and dads up and down the country who every morning on a wet Saturday in the middle of winter take their 7, 6, 8 and 10 and 15-year-olds out to rugby. And that's part of the rugby union. That's part of rugby folklore in New Zealand. And they like to go home and actually watch an All Black Test in Auckland live. They can't be there themselves. And they just like to watch it live. And the hour's delay, I think, is a bit petty.
And on that subject of folklore, there was I think it was the Alliance who said all New Zealanders should be able to see the All Blacks live regardless of income or location. Is there not something profoundly important about that?
Well, rugby is important to New Zealand. It's important to our foreign profile. I mean, it's a unique sport in the New Zealand context. It's the only major world sport where New Zealand can expect, on past performance and current performance, to have a dominant role on the world scene. Not always winning, but have a dominant role on the world scene. Unfortunately, we can't say that of any other sport. From time to time we do very, very well, and netballers are probably the closest next sport to do that. They certainly have a dominant role in netball, so perhaps we could add them in as well. But it's not as big a spectator sport worldwide. You've got to be quite honest about it. So rugby is unique in New Zealand. It's quite different in Australia. So you need to look to Australia for guidance on rugby because they are more interested possibly in league or Australian rules or whatever, and they have magnificent cricket teams who dominate world cricket. So rugby has a unique position in the New Zealand psychic.
Yes, I know all that. So having painted this wondrous picture for us, isn't the onus on you to actually do something about it? So that if I, as a voter, as a rugby fan in Tikawiti, I can sit down and watch the All Blacks live on television when they play somebody else.
Well, I think somebody said, of course, the rugby union are elected Somebody said they're doing it on everybody else. So they're elected to run the sport. The government doesn't own the sport. Why I became involved was quite simply to try and get a message through to the three parties, the Rugby Union, Sky and Television New Zealand, that they should take into account this broader aspect of the game. And we don't own, we the government, the Parliament of New Zealand, don't own rugby. We don't involve ourselves in administration. We really speak as high-profile public citizens because we are concerned. Is Parliament going to pass legislation, Mike? Frankly, I doubt it. I think they'll, at the final analysis, say, well, we'll have to put up with it.
If they put something in, will you vote for it?
Well, it depends what they put in, of course. Got to see that on the day. And I don't know that anyone finally will put something in. Northern Maori MPs talking about it. The Labour spokesperson Mahari was talking about it. But I understand the Labour leadership has said they will not support legislation.
Thanks for your time. Prime Minister Jim Bolger, 7:24.
In Britain, Prime Minister John Major has challenged the Sinn Féin to condemn the IRA bomb in London in order to restart the Northern Ireland peace process. In his first official reaction to Friday's bomb blast, the Prime Minister told the House of Commons that he's not walking away from the peace process, but he vows to press ahead with controversial elections. And he's defended his government's progress during the 17-month ceasefire.
We constantly sought to move the peace process forward on towards the all-party negotiations that everyone knows are necessary. No one, Madam Speaker, took more risks for peace than this government over the last 2 years. But we never lost sight of the fact that the IRA commitment had not been made for good. No responsible government could have done otherwise. Sinn Féin must decide whether they are a front for the IRA or a democratic political party committed to the ballot and not to the bullet. Meanwhile, one thing is clear. In the absence of a genuine end to this renewed violence, meetings between British ministers and Sinn Féin are not acceptable and cannot take place.
Well, that's British Prime Minister John Major, and to discuss his speech, we're joined now by Westminster correspondent Des Fahey. Good evening to you.
Good evening to you.
Now, just what significance can we put on John Major's words?
Well, this was an impressive performance by the Prime Minister, and he was very much walking a tightrope. On the one hand, he does not want to be seen giving concessions to the terrorists, but on the other hand, he wants to keep a momentum up for the peace process. So, as he said in the course of his statement, he was not closing doors. He also went on later to say in response to various MPs' questions, I am not raising barriers. So all the time he is trying to give Sinn Féin the opportunity to enter the whole process that would lead to negotiations, but is making it clear that his preferred option at the moment is very much this idea that he floated immediately after the Mitchell report. This was this commission that looked into the way that they might move forward, chaired by US Senator George Mitchell, where the Prime Minister said what he wanted to see was some sort of elective process, it's described, that would then bring all the people who had been elected around a table to discuss the next steps in the peace process. He's still very much wedded to that. The Irish government, on the other hand, is still not very keen. Although both governments had a unified reaction and a unified condemnation of the bomb on Friday, they both still clearly have disagreements. And John Major said in the course of his statement that he intends seeing the Irish Prime Minister, not this week, but quite probably next week. And much rests on that, really, because as everybody who has either commentated or is part of this observes, the best progress is made when the two governments are actually marching in step.
Well, you say he remains wedded to the idea of elections. Why is he sticking with that line so hard fast?
Well, he says that there is only one way that they could have, this is Sinn Féin, demonstrate in the past that they were prepared to abide by a democratic process, and that was to show that they were prepared to give up violence, and that would mean decommissioning arms. In the Mitchell report, it was made quite clear that there was no chance of the IRA decommissioning arms in advance of negotiations. So therefore, the only other way, as far as John Major is concerned, is to have some elective process that would give an authority to the people who are sitting around the table, including Sinn Féin, for them to enter negotiations. The problem about this is that Ian Paisley, and I was talking to him only an hour or so ago, has made it quite clear that even if there are elections, even if Sinn Féin takes part in them, and even if representatives are there, he's not going to negotiate with them. So you might well ask why there is any point in Sinn Féin even entering these elections if some of the people concerned are not going to acknowledge them as legitimate negotiators. So it's very much a problem that has to be resolved with all the parties. At first, in talks that the British Prime Minister in the form of John Major and equally John Bruton intend having intense negotiations with the various parties involved. But the one thing, as John Major was making clear in that clip, they are not prepared to sit down, no British minister nor an Irish minister, with Sinn Féin until such time as they have shown that they condemn the violence or that the ceasefire is returned or some other demonstration that is acceptable is given.
But clearly, if Sinn Féin isn't at the table, no deal will be done.
That is obviously it, but the problem about getting everybody around the table is that John Major cannot force anybody to go around the table. This is why he keeps talking all the time that there must be confidence on the part of all the people involved that they can sit around that table and come to some conclusion that everybody is going to agree by. Hence, once again, the role for the elective body. That would give the people around the table some authority. And the only way that you can have that sort of confidence is if people believe that those who are part of the negotiation process are not going to turn around and start waving guns about if they don't happen to get what they like through the democratic process. It's a very much a crisis point in the whole peace process in Northern Ireland, and the Prime Minister is due in a little under 3 hours to make an address to the nation that will be very much, I think, an address to the people of Northern Ireland. And he made it quite clear that he wants them to have their voice and to put pressure in whatever way they see fit on their elected representatives to have peace and to get the peace process back on track, and equally to bring back the ceasefire. Because he said the benefits that they've had in the months, 18 months or so of the ceasefire thus far have been such that people do not want to go back to violence, and that is quite obvious. Everybody in the province, all the politicians are agreed that people desperately want the ceasefire back simply because of the normality that it gave them for just a few months.
Thank you very much. That's Westminster correspondent Des Fahey, 29 minutes past 7.
Well, more on this rescue helicopter which has gone missing. It's been missing in Canterbury since last night. With us is Sergeant Steve Goy. Good morning, Sergeant.
Good morning.
What sort of helicopter is it?
I believe it's a Hughes is the type of helicopter he flies, but I'm not too sure on that myself.
How many people on board?
2.
It was sent out last night at what time?
Sent out last night at about 9 p.m.
So after dark?
Yes, it was.
And to what area?
They were originally flying to the where the Rakaia River Bridge at the State Highway 1 down in Canterbury.
Last contact was when?
10:30 last night was the last contact with the occupants of the helicopter.
What was the weather like?
I don't have the information here with me at the moment. I'm just wicking through the log. No, I can't give you that information, sorry.
So what's the plan for the day?
Well, the plan for the day is really to find them. We've started the search in the area. It's still foggy up there at the moment, apparently, and we're putting ground searches in. And as soon as the conditions are suitable, we'll have some air searches up.
Thanks for your time, Sergeant Steve Goy. We'll keep you in touch with that. What's coming up?
Well, coming up, we'll have more on the government's lifting the lid on its proposed tax cuts and social spending. We'll also be going to India, talking to Ranjan Gupta about World Cup cricket, among other things. And there's a call for an urgent overhaul of accident compensation laws, mainly because of the increasing role that courts are playing in awarding damages. But with the news, here's Catriona McCleod.
Good morning. The Rugby Union is defending the agreement, which means all black test matches over the next 3 years will only be screened live on Sky TV. The games will be shown delayed on TVNZ by at least an hour. Talking to Morning Report, the Rugby Union chairperson Richie Guy says the issue has aroused a lot of emotion, but he claims without the multi-million-dollar Sky deal, the future of the All Black team would have been in doubt. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister has told the programme he's happy some sort of deal has been struck which allows most New Zealanders to watch the All Blacks. He says he had hoped that at least New Zealand tests would be screened live. However, he doubts Parliament will move to block the deal with any legislation. A search has been launched this morning for a missing rescue helicopter in Canterbury. Police say the Mount Hutt helicopter was sent into the Rakaia Gorge to pick up 4 trampers at 10:30 last night. Inspector Dave Laurie says the 2 men haven't been heard from since. Rescue crews are searching the area this morning but are being hampered by fog and high river levels. A second helicopter was sent in last night to pick up the 4 stranded trampers. A man has died after a fall at the Auckland casino. Police say the man fell approximately 8 metres from the top of the escalators at the casino's mezzanine floor. They're investigating his death. The British Prime Minister John Major has warned the IRA might detonate more bombs in the wake of Saturday's fatal blast in London, but has vowed to press ahead with elections to move the Northern Irish peace process forward. The comments came in an emergency statement to Parliament, in which Mr Major paid tribute to the 2 men killed in the recent explosion. He said the IRA had to resume its ceasefire before there could be any return to ministerial talks with its political wing, Sinn Féin. More details of the government's tax cut and spending plans are to be announced today. The budget policy statement is a pre-budget document required under the fiscal responsibility laws setting out spending priorities. The government has already committed $3 billion for tax cuts and new spending over the next 2 years. But the Finance Minister is signalling more money could be revealed today. There's a call for an urgent overhaul of ACC following variations in compensation and fines for workplace accidents. Recent cases have seen a company fined $60,000 after a worker was injured, while another was fined $15,000 after a man was killed. The president of the Council of Trade Unions, Ross Wilson, says the variations are a concern.
There should be proper provision, either in the accident compensation scheme or by restoration of the right to sue in the civil courts for damages for pain and suffering and loss of enjoyment of life.
An Auckland minister says he doesn't regret the vandalism of a billboard of a naked man next to his church, despite impending legal action. The Ponsonby billboard shows a naked man from the back with a safe-sex message. It was painted over and ripped by a group from the church's congregation. The advertising company responsible for the ad says there's no excuse for blatant vandalism and legal action will be taken. That's the news.
When fossil hunter Joan Whiffen went out to find us a dinosaur in New Zealand, she had her share of reactions.
They couldn't really understand why, reasonably normal looking little old lady should come in here humping great rocks around just for the sheer pleasure of it.
This Sunday Spectrum traces the story that rewrote New Zealand's geological history. Spectrum after the news at 8 Sunday morning here on National Radio.
Now the weather around the country today. In Kaitaia, some morning rain, light winds and 25. For Pahia and Russell, mostly cloudy, little wind, 26. Dargaville, some morning rain, light winds, 26. Whangarei, mostly cloudy, light winds, 26. In Auckland, patchy morning rain, light winds and 26. For Tauranga, some morning drizzle, light winds and 25. In Hamilton, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 26. Taumaranui, morning drizzle clearing, little wind, 27. Rotorua, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 24. Tokoroa, morning drizzle clearing, light winds and 25. Taupo, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 25. New Plymouth, cloudy periods, westerlies 23. Gisborne, fine afternoon sea breezes 27. Napier and Hastings, fine afternoon sea breezes and 26. Dannevirke, fine with light winds 25. Masterton, fine with light winds 27. Wanganui, morning drizzle clearing, little wind 25. In Palmerston North, mostly cloudy, light winds and 26. In Levin, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 25. Paraparaumu, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 24. In Wellington, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes and 23. Motueka, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes and 25. In Nelson, cloud breaking, afternoon sea breezes and 24. In Westport, some rain, light winds 23. Blenheim, fine with light winds 26. Kaikoura, some morning cloud, light winds and 22. Christchurch, cloud clearing, light winds and 22. In Dunedin, cloudy at times, northeast breezes and 19. For Ashburton, some morning cloud, then fine, light winds and 23. In Timaru, becoming fine, little wind and 21. Oamaru, cloud clearing, northeast breezes and 20. For Greymouth and Hokitika, some rain, light winds and 21. For Alexandra, cloud clearing, light winds and 26. In Queenstown, cloud clearing, light winds and 20. For Gore, some morning cloud, then fine, northwest winds and 20. And for Invercargill, cloudy periods, light winds and 20 degrees. It's 23 minutes to 8.
Thank you, Catriona. More news at 8 o'clock, but now with sports, here's Ken Caddick.
Good morning. New Zealand cricket authorities are continuing to investigate why they were overlooked for a crucial meeting at the World Cup in Calcutta yesterday. The meeting, involving the 11 other competing nations, voted 6-5 in favour of stripping Australia and the West Indies of 2 points for refusing to play in Sri Lanka. And commentator Brian Waddle says it was a serious oversight.
The exclusion of New Zealand from a crucial meeting to address the World Cup impasse is not only an insult prejudging New Zealand's opinion, but a blatant, unsubtle manipulation in favour of Sri Lanka. It only serves to diminish the status of the game's one-day showpiece to little more than an Indian-hosted series with the world's best teams as invitees. Irrespective of any issues involved, it's farcical that an event this prestigious should incorporate a default victory. It continues to highlight the irrelevance of the ICC, which has abdicated its responsibility as the game's ruling body.
Meanwhile, New Zealand team manager Grant Alabaster, who should have attended the meeting, claims the outcome isn't valid. Alabaster wasn't told the meeting was taking place after attending earlier ones, and he's still at a loss to know why.
If one takes the magnanimous view, one says, well, maybe it was an oversight. But it seems to me to have been a very critical oversight. And one that is not becoming of people who are organising such an important event.
And Australia and the West Indies face the prospect of multi-million-dollar fines for refusing to play World Cup matches in Sri Lanka. A Sydney newspaper has reported the president of the Indian Cricket Board of Control is saying the two countries won't get away lightly, and that the last hasn't been heard on this episode, with fines reaching $3 or $4 million a possibility. While Australia may have lost public support for refusing to play its World Cup matches in Sri Lanka, Indian and Pakistani bookmakers are still backing them. Illegal Indian betting syndicates have Mark Taylor's team the firm favourites at 3-1, while in Pakistan they've been quoted at 2-1. South Africa are next favourites at 9-2. Defending champions Pakistan are at 5-1, while New Zealand's back on 20-1. And just to compound a miserable couple of days for Australian sport, their latest golden girl of swimming may miss the Atlanta Olympics after testing positive for a banned drug she apparently took to stop a headache. Samantha Riley, who holds 3 world records, is reported to have tested positive for a banned painkiller, which has a maximum 2-year suspension. Riley's coach, Scott Volkers, says the drug was inadvertently taken after the World Short Course Championships in Rio de Janeiro in December, and that's all he can comment on. The sport's governing body, FINA, is now investigating. Auckland Warriors and Auckland Rugby League boss Gerald Ryan says he doesn't know of any Auckland clubs wanting to join the Australian Rugby League. This follows comments yesterday by ARL Chief Executive John Quayle that a number of New Zealand clubs are interested in joining his organisation. The Auckland Rugby League is affiliated with Super League, and Ryan says he hasn't heard of any local clubs wanting to switch.
They have a duty, I think, if they feel aggrieved or feel something is wrong, to go through the proper channels. We have the Auckland Rugby League. We have a very good general manager. We also have a executive group of called the management group of all the clubs, and they haven't been told anything either. You would have thought they would have gone through that source.
Gerald Ryan says a court decision on whether the Warriors and other Super Leagues clubs broke loyalty agreements with the Australian Rugby League could be known later this week. Meanwhile, Warriors loose forward Tony Tuimavave will be out of action for 3 to 4 weeks after breaking an index finger in last Friday's loss to Cronulla. The hard-tackling forward is likely to miss the Warriors' opening Super League matches in early March. A new world number 1 in men's tennis, Austrian Thomas Muster is now the highest-ranked player in the world, thanks to a twist of fate in the ATP Tour calendar. Muster's taken over from American Andre Agassi, who lost all the points he collected from last year's San Jose tournament because this year's event was postponed for a week to accommodate Davis Cup ties. Muster says he's been dreaming about becoming world number 1 and says he deserves the spot despite being regarded as a clay court specialist. Back at home, Canterbury, Auckland and Wellington are likely to be the main obstacles to North Harbour's chances of retaining the National Tennis League title. The league starts today and North Harbour team manager Ross Morrison says the 8 teams in the competition look very even.
Canterbury is a big threat. Wellington, I think, will be tough, and Auckland, who haven't won it for a few years, I think they're looking to get back on the winners' rostrum.
And English First Division soccer side Birmingham could be made to play a game behind closed doors after coins and a snooker ball were thrown onto the pitch during yesterday's League Cup semi-final defeat by Leeds. Leeds skipper Gary McAllister was struck by a missile as he prepared to take a corner. Referee Keith Cooper told the English Football Association that other coins and a snooker ball were also thrown from the crowd during Leeds' 2-1 First League win. And that's the latest in sports news.
Thank you, Kent. 18 minutes to 8. The bodies of two trampers were recovered in Arthur's Pass National Park yesterday. The couple are presumed drowned after they were seen earlier in the day by another group of trampers clinging to a pole in the middle of the Hordern River. Joining us now is Arthur's Pass Police Officer Neil Shepherd. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning, Giles.
Now, do we know who these trampers are?
Yes, I think at this stage we do. Those inquiries were being done in Christchurch last night, and to date I haven't heard back from them. However, we've got a good idea who they were.
Were they local people or not?
From Christchurch, yes.
Do we know how they got into the river?
It looks like earlier on in the day they'd set off to go tramping up the Hordern Valley and had crossed the river and gone some distance upstream, and for some reason, perhaps high rivers, they turned around and come back in the afternoon, and they were seen trying to cross the river above a fence line, a single-strand electric fence wire across the valley. They got into difficulty somehow and got swept off their feet, and it appears that they've been attached together somehow, either tied together or hanging onto each other, and they've gone both sides of a single pole which is in the middle of the river and become lodged there.
Were weather and conditions in the area bad or good at the time?
It was actually fine. I mean, it wasn't raining at the site. However, the river comes from right in the heart of the Southern Alps on the main divide, and we'd had a lot of rain earlier. In fact, it was raining at Arthur's Pass very heavily at the time, so the rivers were very high and discoloured.
Right, the group that discovered them, was there nothing they could do to help the two people?
No, they were on the other side of the river, and albeit they were only 75 metres or so away, they couldn't enter the river and go across to their aid. However, they ran downstream several hundred metres to where a bulldozer was working, and they got the assistance of the bulldozer to work its way upstream and hopefully give these people a hand. But unfortunately, by the time it had got there, several minutes later, these people had disappeared.
So it's a cautionary tale to people tramping in that area?
Oh, definitely, yes. Yeah. Seek the advice of the local visitor information centre, get the weather forecast, this sort of thing.
Thanks very much for your time this morning. That's Arthur's Pass Police Officer Neil Shepherd.
7:45, my apologies. The government sets the scene for proposed tax cuts and social spending increases today with a pre-budget document which is being condemned before it's released. Under the Fiscal Responsibility Act, a statement revealing broad spending priorities has to be published before the budget. The second such statement is due this morning. Here's Anna Hughes.
Although little new information on the tax cuts is expected, the papers will detail the cost of new government spending programs yet to be introduced. Close to $300 million in the next financial year, rising to $710 million 2 years later, has already been earmarked for extra spending on education and family assistance. Finance Minister Bill Birch is signalling today's statement could reveal some additional spending to that already announced.
We do revisit those allocations of resources, and there will be some changes. Not major changes, but the government, since the December announcement, looked at the appropriateness of the allocation of resources and education and for some of the other initiatives.
Bill Birch won't detail exactly how much people will get out of the tax cut and social policy package till next Monday. Today's pre-budget statement goes to a parliamentary select committee for public submission after its release. Labour's cynical about the statement. Finance spokesperson Michael Cullen believes the government has made a mockery of the whole budgetary process.
The government clearly has decided upon the major elements of its budget program for the coming year, linked to the election. It's not going to suddenly decide as a result of public submissions from health groups and education groups and housing groups that it should not proceed with the size or the nature of the tax cuts it's proposing. It's committed to those. So the fundamental features of the budget policy statement are unchangeable, whatever the nature of the public submissions may be.
That isn't stopping several groups which commented on the budget policy statement last year repeating the exercise. The Catholic Church's Office for Justice, Peace and Development in Wellington will be using the process to press for more spending on health and education. It's also concerned higher income earners will get most from the tax cuts. Spokesperson Ruth Smithies is imploring the government to alter the way it's distributing the money.
A low-income family spends about $10 per week on GST on the food that they buy in that week. Now, one way of really helping people is by cutting the GST on basic food items. That is just one way. Another way would be to look at the the benefit system and what beneficiaries are getting.
The Business Roundtable will be closely reading today's pre-budget statement and will be checking for any extra spending. Executive Director Roger Kerr says its concerns about additional spending will be reflected in the Roundtable's submissions on the document.
Contrary to a lot of people's beliefs, government spending has actually been growing quite strongly in recent time. The government spent more than $1 billion in terms of new commitments over the last 12 months. And I think that's having an effect now on the private sector, and we'll be worried to see what the future outlook is.
The Finance Minister says public submissions are important. Bill Birch says this year's budget planning has been guided by submissions and debate since the release of last year's budget policy statement. From Parliament for Morning Report, Anna Hughes.
12 minutes to 8, and now to Sri Lanka, where security forces have run amok in a village in the northeast of the country, killing up to 30 civilians. A short time ago, I spoke to our correspondent in Colombo, Amal Jayasinghe, and asked him how this came to happen.
Well, it seems that the Tamil Tigers had ambushed an army patrol in the northeastern part of the country, and just after that, the troops seem to have gone on the rampage and killed a lot of civilians in a neighboring village, and the victims seem to be from the minority Tamil community. And we are getting reports of up to about 30 civilians killed and another 25 or so in hospital. The victims include women and children. And apart from that, there are no other details. On the military side, 2 soldiers have been killed and about 2 or 3 injured. The military say that they have launched an investigation, but apart from that, there is no other word from the government.
Is there independent confirmation that this attack and the revenge attack by the troops took place?
Well, of course, we are getting reports from some local officials in that area who say that the attack took place, and also some other Tamil members of parliament have in fact asked the government for an inquiry. They are also saying that they're confirming that the attack in fact took place. At this stage, I think the military is not denying that there was this killing, but of course there will be some attempt to play it down.
These revenge attacks, have they happened in the past by army troops?
We saw lots of these attacks 3-4 years ago, but there had been a steady decline in this kind of retaliatory attacks by the security forces because I think they were getting a little more professional. But for some reason, in this case, it seems a fairly large loss of life. And it's the first time in about 2 years we are seeing this kind of large-scale backlash.
Do the Sri Lankan government and military commanders have control of their forces? Are they able to impose discipline?
Well, by and large, yes. But then this kind of indiscipline is not uncommon, though it has, as I told you earlier, it has been on the decline. But considering that you're taking large number of men, giving them very little training and then throwing them into the battlefield, I think this kind of thing is to be expected.
Right, as part of the continuing battle between the Sri Lankan government and Tamil Tigers, I understand another large truck bomb has been found, but it's been defused. Is that right?
That's right. In fact, the bomb was found inside the city itself. It's in a commercial area of the capital, and the truck had been parked at a Buddhist temple for a considerable period of time, possibly over a month or so. And the Buddhist monk alerted the police saying that nobody had claimed this truck for some time. So when they checked, especially the Army Bomb Disposal Squad, they found that the diesel tank had been modified, and there were about 121 kilograms of high explosives. And these explosives were rigged up to a triggering device, but only the battery which is necessary for setting off the explosion was missing. But apart from that, the bomb was it had been assembled to be triggered. But fortunately, the military was able to defuse it.
Is this being regarded as another truck bomb that was available to the Tamil Tigers that they were preparing to use inside Colombo City?
Yes, police are saying that this is definitely a Tamil Tiger bomb that was to be activated within the city. In fact, the police have been saying that there are more of these truck bombs and also vehicle bombs, and as a result, since the bombing of the Central Bank building on the 31st of January, no heavy vehicles are allowed into the city center. So that has been part of the tight security measures we are seeing in the capital now. So this didn't come as a surprise. though in this case, the security forces seem to have been rather lucky.
The authorities won't be pleased to hear of this, though, because it will lend credence to the fears that the Australian and West Indian cricketers had for their own safety in Colombo, won't it?
Yes, you're quite right. I think as much as they're relieved that the bomb was discovered in time, it could not have come at a worse time, because this comes barely 24 hours before a joint Indo-Pakistan team arrives in the country. And also, as you said, that this is going to lend credibility or support the claim of the Australians that they had some reservations about coming to Colombo. So I think in that context, this is definitely a setback to the organisers of the World Cup. And this is definitely going to strengthen the Australians and the West Indies. And the fear now in Colombo is that with the latest discovery, it may perhaps influence the Kenyans and players from Zimbabwe also to keep away. And if that happens, then it's going to be a mockery of the entire World Cup.
That's our correspondent in the Sri Lankan capital, Colombo, Amal Jayasinghe, speaking to me a short time ago. 7 minutes to 8. And so to Auckland, where a man has died after a fall at the Auckland casino this morning after he was being escorted from the gaming floor by security staff. Police say the 29-year-old man fell approximately 8 metres after hopping onto an escalator banister, overbalancing and falling to the ground. Joining me now is Inspector Rod Drummond from Auckland Police. Good morning.
Good morning.
What more can you tell us about this incident, Inspector?
Not much more than what you've told your listeners at the present stage. The incident happened about 20 past 4 this morning. The gentleman was being escorted from the gaming floor of the casino, and he was in a high-spirited manner there, and whilst he was being escorted down the escalator, the security staff were talking to each other, and he's hopped onto the banister and overbalanced backwards and fallen about 8 metres to the ground.
When you talk about high-spirited, are we really saying that the guy was drunk and he was being thrown out?
No, well, I can't tell you that at this stage because I haven't heard back from the police at the scene, and I don't know the reason why he was being escorted out at this stage.
Was there any physical contact between the guards and the man concerned?
No, I've had a preliminary view of the video, and it clearly identifies that there is no physical contact. The security guard is about 1 or 2 metres away, and he was just amazed when he's turned around and the gentleman wasn't there any longer.
Now, what's the progress of your investigation? You'll be speaking to witnesses?
Yes, I've got staff at the casino at the present time, and also staff trying to locate the next of kin of the deceased. And we have notified the Labour Department, of course.
And do you have any concerns? I mean, the casino itself, it's only been open just over a week, but there have been several high-profile public incidents. Do you have any concern about what's happening there?
Not specifically at this stage. I'll leave that to the matter of the experts and the design and that. It seems a bit similar to what we had problems with the escalators at the Finance Plaza earlier on.
All right, thank you very much for your time. That's Inspector Rod Drummond of Auckland Police. It's 4 minutes to 8.
In Iowa, 9 candidates are seeking the Republican nomination for the presidency. The interesting thing about today's vote is that 20% of voters remain undecided. The results should be known this evening New Zealand time. Senate leader Bob Dole is considered the favourite, but Steve Forbes is hot on his heels. He's polling strongly. 40%, this is the really interesting bit, of the state's Republican voters describe themselves as conservative Christians, but their vote this time round is expected to be split, therefore having less influence. Judy Lessing reports that this will harm one of the major contenders, right-wing moral campaigner Pat Buchanan, who tends to polarise voters.
It's not just on questions that some people would regard as moral or family value questions either, or gays in the military, which is a hot-button item for some people. It's also his conservatism over international relations. He would like to probably pull the United States out of the United Nations, pull out of international trade agreements like GATT and NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Area, because he sees these as kind of instruments of world government. And there are quite a lot of Americans, not a majority, who see international organizations like that as some way for the world to run rampant and take over the United States. I mean, that I think this is a load of rubbish doesn't mean a thing, because if you're convinced about that, quite frankly, you're convinced, and that's it. But he may be just too way out for a lot of people who really give some thought to this question.
Well, if the religious vote is split, as it looks like it could well be, this surely will help Dole and or Forbes, will it not?
Yes, I think it's both of them. Everybody seems to think that Dole's support is rather soft. He's from the next-door state in Kansas, but nobody seems to be terribly enthusiastic about him. And I hate to say it, but I think one of those reasons might well be that he'll be 73 years old later this year, and that would make him the oldest president if he were to be elected, even older than Reagan was. And, people just wonder about somebody who's... we're not suggesting for a moment that he's not capable of being president, simply that people do worry about people as they get a little older. Will they last the course? The other thing is that he is regarded as a moderate by the extreme right, which is really weird because he's really pretty far to the right. I think it's going to help Forbes quite a bit. Forbes came in with absolutely no local organization, and that's supposed to be the key in Iowa. So instead, he threw about $15 million of his own money into a television campaign, and he's been touring the state by bus. And it's now been found that the campaign has indeed admitted that it has been behind some of these smear polling tactics that have been used by telephone. They've been targeting Forbes supporters and saying things like, if you knew that Steve Forbes was in favor of gays in the military, would this still make you vote for him, or would you put your vote somewhere else? This is a really illegitimate way, many people say, of using polls. They're apparently called push polls. And Steve Forbes some days ago said that this was happening, and now indeed it does appear that some of the people supporting Dole have been behind this. I think Steve Forbes has to do well, though. I really think that he doesn't have to be second, but he has to be a decent third.
All right, prediction time, Judy. Dole, Forbes, Buchanan. What do you think?
Well, I think you've forgotten Lamar Alexander, the former governor of Tennessee. He's been moving up in the polls. He spent months and months in Iowa organizing. He appears on the surface, partly because most people don't know much about him, to be a fairly acceptable candidate because he was a pretty decent governor of Tennessee. Then he was president of the University of Tennessee's system. And locals, I've just been in Tennessee, locals say he did a pretty good job. The question is, has he got it in him to run a country the way...
All right, so that's Judy Lessing earlier on this morning. Listen to the polling, though. Dole 25, Forbes 25, Buchanan 19, Alexander, he's not in it, at 11. As we say, we'll know the results later tonight.
Good morning, New Zealand. This is Morning Report with Mike Hosking and Gyles Beckford, Tuesday the 13th of February. Still to come on the programme, more live reaction to delayed rugby coverage, fixed mortgages win the day with home buyers, and politics in Queensland, they take a new twist. With the news, here's Catriona McCleod.
Good morning. Bad weather is hampering a search for a rescue helicopter missing with 2 people on board in Canterbury this morning. The Mount Hutt helicopter was sent into the Rakaya Gorge to pick up 4 trampers at 10:30 last night. Sergeant Steve Goy says the 2 men haven't been heard from since, and there are now fears for their safety.
We've started the search in the area. It's still foggy up there at the moment, apparently, and we're putting ground searches in, and as soon as the conditions are suitable, we'll have some air searches up.
Sergeant Steve Goy. Another helicopter was sent into the area last night to pick up the trampers. A man is dead after a fall at the Auckland casino early this morning after he'd been escorted from the gaming floor by security staff. Police say the 29-year-old man fell about 8 metres after climbing onto an escalator banister, overbalancing and falling to the ground. Inspector Rod Drummond told Morning Report the incident happened about 4:20 and the man was acting in a high-spirited manner at the time. He said there was no contact between the security guard and the man when the incident happened. The man was taken to Auckland Hospital in a serious condition and died shortly after. Police and Labour Department staff are investigating the incident. Police in Arthur's Pass are warning trampers to heed local warnings after the death of 2 trampers yesterday. The man and woman from Christchurch died after getting into difficulties while crossing the Hordern River. Neil Shepherd from Arthur's Pass Police told Morning Report that it appears the couple had turned back from a planned tramp. He says although the weather was fine, the river was running high after heavy rain in the divide. A group of trampers saw the couple in difficulties, but their attempts to get help came too late. The Rugby Union has again defended its decision to sell the television rights to All Black games against widespread criticism from followers who won't be able to watch games live without paying for Sky TV. Many rugby supporters are also disappointed at the announcement that Sky TV has the live television rights to All Black test matches for the next 3 years because parts of the country can't get a clear signal. Games will be shown on free-to-air television by TVNZ after a delay of at least an hour. Rugby Union Chairman Richie Guy told Morning Report that many emotive statements are being made, but the union had to act quickly to save All Black rugby.
We are now in an era where the sport has gone professional. It had to go professional. There wasn't an option. And at the end of the day, the consumer will pay. Whether they pay it in one form or another, it makes no difference. The consumer will still pay.
Richie Guy said that if the union had attached conditions about free live coverage to the TV agreement, it would have been reduced by about 80%. And the Prime Minister told Morning Report Rugby Union gambled in the deal on how much rugby would be shown on free-to-air television and has only been partly successful. Jim Bolger described the 1-hour delay before All Black games are screened on TVNZ as a bit petty. He ruled out any government intervention on the issue. The British Prime Minister has told the House of Commons that Britain won't be sidetracked in its pursuit of peace in Northern Ireland. And John Major repeated his call for an elected body in Northern Ireland to participate in peace talks. This condition has been unpopular with all other parties except the Unionists who are insisting on it. Wayne Brittenden reports.
Despite the Irish government's urging for John Major to drop his call for an election in Northern Ireland, the British Prime Minister called for it again yesterday in the House of Commons.
The proposed elections are a door to full negotiations. I continue to believe that they provide the most promising opening available. We will pursue this proposal and seek to persuade all concerned that it is indeed a way forward, not a means of delaying progress.
But Ireland's Prime Minister John Bruton says that John Major's proposal amounts to throwing fuel on the fire. Wayne Brittenden, Radio New Zealand News, London.
Back home, the budget policy statement from the Finance Minister today is not expected to stir financial markets. The statement sets the framework for the next budget, and our economics correspondent says no major new initiatives are expected because the government has little room to manoeuvre.
In a self-imposed discipline, the government's promised to only cut taxes at the time when public debt goes below 30% of New Zealand's gross domestic product. And after announcing a spending and tax package worth billions of dollars in December, any more big spend-ups would push the government over the 30% target. But details of the tax cuts won't be announced today. They've been put off till next week. Instead, today's statement from the Minister will focus on where $300 million worth of new initiatives this year will be spent. This is Bronwyn Evans.
Police and military units have been placed on maximum alert in Sri Lanka for today's goodwill cricket match between a combined India-Pakistan team and Sri Lanka in Colombo. Heavy vehicles have been banned from entering the Sri Lankan capital, while police and military units have stepped up roadblocks and searches. A Sri Lankan defence official says the highest security to all visiting World Cup teams has been assured following the Tamil Tiger suicide bomb attack which killed 87 late last month. That's the news. Weather after this.
A woman escapes the indignity of incarceration in a retirement home.
Tom says it's a nice place, Mum. Warm and clean and friendly and plenty to do. Except that everything to do there ends up with dying. There are better places to do that and better people to do it with.
Kate Harcourt reads Going Home by Paddy Richardson this Friday night on Bookshelf. Bookshelf plays every weeknight at 10:30 on National Radio.
The Met Service short forecast for all New Zealand to midnight tonight. For the north and west of the North Island, mostly cloudy morning and evening with patches of drizzle. fine breaks this afternoon. In the east from Gisborne to Dunedin, also for Wellington and Nelson, fine weather except for morning cloud and a few showers about the western Nelson Ranges. Along the South Island west coast, patches of rain. For South Otago and Southland, mainly fine but for patchy rain about Stewart Island. However, this evening, some rain spreading elsewhere. And for the Chathams, mostly cloudy, some drizzle morning and evening. And for the main centres today, in Auckland, patchy morning rain, light winds, a maximum of 26. In Wellington, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes, a maximum of 23. In Christchurch, cloud clearing, light winds, a maximum of 22. And for Dunedin, cloudy at times, northeast breezes, and a maximum of 19 degrees. You're with National Radio, it's 7 minutes past 8.
Got to go to Lomu. The pass goes past him. Some wild passing. He goes past Underwood. He goes on 22. Beats another one. Puts the pass in. Beats another one. Oh, that is one of the great tries of all time. That is one of the great tries. Graham, I have not seen a better try than that.
The unmistakable tones of Graham Moody and his cohort with a live radio commentary. We might talk about that as one of the implications here on this whole business of free-to-air television and, of course, the fact that Sky Television has secured the live television rights to All Black Test matches for the next 3 years. Television New Zealand is involved with this, as I'm sure you're well aware by now. They say they're happy to have signed this deal with Sky to ensure some free-to-air coverage does remain. From Television New Zealand, Alistair Carthew is with us. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
Legislation, does that worry you?
Well, legislation is something for the politicians. It is in place in Australia and has been working there reasonably successfully, but it's been there for 18 months to 2 years, well before News Limited, for example, bought the Super League and the rugby rights. And also it's going through in England, and the House of Lords the other day brought down a decision which showed that they're very worried about pay television monopolising major sports events. So the politicians here are having a look at it, I'm sure. It may be a little difficult because of cutting across property rights, etc., now that a deal has been done and the rights have been sold. But that's something that they have to really look at pretty hard, I think.
Well, there's two interesting points there. So you're suggesting the rugby, it's a done deal, it's too late.
Well, we've agreed on a deal which won't give us free-to-air live rights. It will give us a lot of other things as far as Television New Zealand is concerned. So that deal is done.
But the future's interesting, isn't it? This is the way of the future for sport, isn't it?
Oh, yes, I think most people accept that you're in a new ball game now. If the rugby players are going to be paid the enormous amounts that they do receive, somebody's got to pay for that. But in our case, Mike, we can't buy something with money we don't have. And that's the simple fact in this case, that Sky TV came up with more money.
The figures I mentioned earlier on the programme sort of right. Last year you spent a couple of million. To win this, you would have had to have spent over 20.
Well, last year it was around 2 million. I think 20 million is probably a bit on the high side, but it's still millions and millions of dollars have to be paid to News Corp by somebody for them to recoup the investment that they made last year, which was $820 million across the three countries, Australia, New Zealand and South Africa.
It's simply not worth it to you to bid that amount of money to run rugby on your station, is it?
Well, we're a commercial operation and we have to do the numbers to see that we can make money out of it if at all possible. Now, rugby is a marginal operation from our point of view at the best of times. So it'll be interesting to see how Sky does in that respect.
But it's part of the profile, isn't it?
It's very much part of the profile, and that's why we pushed very, very hard to try and get live coverage. If I can just put it in context, Mike, we cover over 99% of the country on TV1. Most households these days, or more households, have television sets than telephones. And we've been covering live rugby for a long time. So naturally, we think live free-to-air rugby belongs on TV1, as it has for a long time.
So having said that, how badly will it hurt you?
Well, that's yet to be seen. We don't think it will hurt us that badly because we are showing the games in New Zealand, the All Black games, 1 hour after kick-off, which means people will still be able to tune in and see before the game the result is known. So organisations like Radio New Zealand won't be able to broadcast the result before people actually know it. So that's good. And we'll also be showing the NPC matches live. That's the final live. So they're major games that people still want to see, and they will.
Did you have to pay more for the rights for the deal you've struck today or yesterday this year than you did for the live rights last year? In other words, you're coughing up more than $2 million for what you've done with Sky?
Oh yes, I'm not going to go into the details of the contract, but definitely we would have been paying a lot more than we have previously.
How does it work with commentators, cameras, that sort of thing?
Well, some of that detail is still to be gone into, but I would imagine that Sky might like to have separate commentators, for example. We'd still have our own, but Sky might like to give some exclusivity, if you like, to their product. I'm not sure. That's something that they've still got to work out.
As regards the provincial games, though, for example, a touring side playing a provincial side, this will not be on free-to-air at all, will it?
No, that's right. So people in the Waikato and Northland or Bay of Plenty who want to watch their team play Scotland, for example, this year, will not see it on free-to-air.
Will that hurt the game, do you think?
Well, I suppose it'll mean more people will go along to the games and help the rugby union.
How did it work, the deal with Sky? You've got a chunk of Sky. Television New Zealand owns a part of Sky, don't they?
We got 16.3%.
Did you have some leverage there?
Only in as much as we knew the people at Sky, I think, in the discussions. So the discussions were pretty arduous and I wouldn't say tense, but they were very healthy discussions. But no, it didn't give us any extra leverage at all. In effect, we are not a major shareholder with that sort of shareholding.
Did the government play any role in this at all?
No, the government didn't play any role, and the Prime Minister and others were on the sidelines, if you like. They expressed their what they wished publicly, but they didn't play a role.
Should they have?
It was a commercial deal.
Should they have?
Well, no, I don't think so. It was a commercial deal between two commercial organisations. That's where it should be.
Thanks for your time. Alistair Carthew, the Television New Zealand spokesperson, did want to talk to the Sky Network Chief Executive Nate Smith. Can't find him. We'll keep looking. It's 14 minutes past 8.
And so to the papers, and today the Herald, Dominion and the Christchurch Press all lead with Sky Television's deal that ends an era of free-to-air live Test rugby. Sky chairman Barry Downey is quoted by the Herald as saying the deal will save rugby from an inevitable slide into oblivion. The Herald has a photograph of American John Perino at Auckland's rescue helicopter base. The 47-year-old says he owes his life to Kiwi emergency care after a heart attack aboard the cruise ship Golden Liner. Also on the front page, Lotto is set to offer more inducements to players, including more than one draw per game. And a convicted drug dealer dying of cancer has been sent home to the United States 2 years into a 12-year sentence.
The Dominion reports the Winebox inquiry is being delayed because Commissioner Sir Ronald Davison's in hospital for a lung condition. There's a photo of American musician Skitch Henderson looking over a restored tiger moth in Hawke's Bay. Henderson is in New Zealand to conduct the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra's Summer Pops Tour. Another front page news, Porirua Christian radio station Rock FM is off air after tenancy problems. Police believe a group of Vietnam refugees based in Wellington are operating as professional shoplifters, and a study shows men's health is worse than women's because of their reluctance to seek medical help.
Today's Christchurch Press reports Sky Television's rugby deal has come under attack from opposition parties who've pledged to protect the live broadcasting of major games on free-to-air television channels. There's a photograph of the Endeavour replica ship as it sails into the Marlborough Sounds yesterday. The paper says cannon fire heralded its arrival as it was escorted by a flotilla of hundreds of boats. The vessel arrives in Littleton on Saturday. Also on the front page, new Christchurch City Council work schemes costing more than $1.6 million may go ahead later this year. The scheme will include the implementation of a one-stop shop for young people seeking work.
Leading the ODT, rate increases are on the horizon for Dunedin residents. The paper says Dunedin City Council's rate take is likely to increase by up to 3% because councillors have backed extra items for the 96-97 draft budget. Also on the front page, docs asking dog owners to keep their dogs under control after the weekend attack, which left a rare Fiordland-crested penguin fighting for its life. And hundreds of Dunedin families face a sharp rise in transport costs after the Ministry of Education announced yesterday it was pulling out of funding 25 school bus services in some Dunedin suburbs. And inside, visitor numbers to the Otago Peninsula were down in the 12 months to December 95, and the trend is concerning local tour operators.
Across the Tasman, where the Australian and Sydney Morning Herald have lead stories predicting a limited future for Queensland Labor Premier Wayne Goss. The Australian reports the Queensland government set to fall after independent MP Liz Cunningham pledged her support for the coalition, and we'll have more on that story a little later in the programme ourselves. The paper reports also on swimmer Samantha Riley's possible ban from the Atlanta Olympics following her positive drug test. Also on the front pages, opposition leader John Howard has outbid Labour in health policy, promising tax rebates of up to $450 a year for families to entice them back to private health insurance. A report on the front page of the Sydney Morning Herald reveals environmental agencies are failing badly and are unable to assess the impact of toxic air pollutants. Inside the paper, the Army could face its biggest shake-up for 95 years if recommendations of an internal study are followed. According to the paper, the study favours losing 5,000 soldiers. Today's Melbourne Age lead story also covers John Howard's generous health package. And a truck packed with TNT and ball bearings was found near a Buddhist temple in Colombo as the Australian cricket team attended the opening ceremony of the World Cup Series in Calcutta.
To the Asia-Pacific headlines, more on that Sri Lankan situation as well. Security forces in Sri Lanka have killed up to 30 civilians in an attack apparently launched in retaliation for an ambush by separatist Tamil rebels. Efforts to free a bus trapped in a highway tunnel in Japan have failed again. Police in Vanuatu have been deployed outside the premises of the Broadcasting Corporation in the wake of last week's resignation of the government. An international mission to investigate human rights abuses and racial discrimination in Fiji may be prevented from entering the country. And China's inflation rate is expected to rise to 9.5% this year.
And today we take our paper report beyond New Zealand and Australia. India, Pakistan and Sri Lanka are hosting the World Cup in cricket. And according to our Delhi correspondent Ranjan Gupta, the tournament has pushed politics off the front page.
Certainly the opening of the World Cup in Calcutta, which has knocked out politics from the main lead in the newspapers, which is quite unusual because Indian papers, at least the better ones, are very traditional with their main captions. It's always politics, and it's something very rare that knocks it out. And certainly in the case of the World Cup, it has. But of course, coming close at heels to that is the question of the political problems, which basically is about a former minister who's to be arrested, about poll funding scandals, and a very important policy speech made by the leader of the BJP that there be public funding for elections so that politicians don't have to look for money and don't get into a soup. But certainly cricket has come as a welcome relief from politics because everything has been so unsavory with corruption charges and counter charges and things like that.
That's our Delhi correspondent Ranjan Gupta, coming up to 8:20.
And back to the rugby, we found the Chief Executive of Sky, Nate Smith. Good morning. Is he with us or not? Good morning, Nate. Are you there, Nate? Hello, Nate Smith. All right, we're going to have to leave that and move on.
And so to the fire ban in much of Canterbury, it will remain in force despite recent rain. Much of Canterbury is still under a blanket fire ban, and firefighters are keeping a 24-hour watch on the site of last week's big blaze at the Burwood Plantation. Tracy Lyle has this report.
Principal Rural Fire Officer Craig Oliver says the situation was reassessed yesterday and it's been decided to continue with the fire ban. He says the area is still extremely dangerous and 30 firefighters are working shifts dampening down hotspots. He says there have been some problems with joggers, hikers and horse riders going into the plantation. He says they need to keep away.
People are always a little inquisitive, but the area is dangerous because of very deep-seated hotspots. As I said, with the trucks moving through the forest, people are liable to get injured.
What is the situation with the actual fire at this stage?
In terms of looking at it generally, I suppose you would say it's out, but it's not out because it's burning down very deep in stumps, and these are very, very dangerous should you walk into one.
Now, what's the situation with the general blanket fire ban?
In relation to the rural area of Christchurch, there's still a definite ban. The rain although it might have dampened the top, has done nothing in the forest and other areas.
Craig Oliver says the fire ban will be reassessed tomorrow. Meanwhile, the cost of fighting the forest fire is tipped to be around $200,000. Craig Oliver says bills relating to the cost of fighting the fire are starting to come in, but it'll be some time before the final cost is known. Craig Oliver says the Christchurch City Council picks up the tab in the first instance, and then a claim is made to the National Rural Firefighting Fund. For Morning Report in Christchurch, Tracy Lyle.
8:22. Nate Smith, good morning.
Good morning, mate.
In putting this bid together, you will have worked out how many people will sign on to Sky. Would that be correct?
That's part of it, yeah.
How many people do you need?
Oh, we need every subscriber we can get.
What, 3.5 million?
That'd be great. That'd be wonderful.
How many do you need to break even? What sort of impact are you expecting it to make on your subscription?
Oh, okay. From that standpoint, I would expect we would grow probably an incremental 10 or 15,000 subscribers a year because of it.
On past experience, do people join up in large numbers for a special event?
They tend to, although they come on pretty consistently throughout the year. Large numbers such as the World Cup cricket, large events such as the World Cup cricket or rugby or rugby league do stimulate growth.
So the bid for the rugby is part of a long-term corporate strategy?
Well, absolutely. We want Sky Sports to become and remain synonymous with sport in New Zealand.
Is sport the big magnet for people who would specifically join?
Sport has the highest profile. Our movie channel is actually our most watched channel, so they seem to complement one another.
What do you make of this reaction this morning?
In what way? What reaction?
The people who don't like it.
Well, I haven't heard. I don't think there's any negative attitude towards Sky. I've been pleased to see that New Zealand actually sort of supports our position from a business standpoint. I think the people that don't like it because they can't receive it, and those that can't receive it, I empathize with.
And there's nothing really you can do about that, though, is there?
Well, I think there is. We've made our signal available free of charge to any area that we can't presently reach.
But that won't reach the whole country, though, will it?
It won't reach the whole country, and it's, as I say, our overall goal ultimately is to reach the whole country. But you've got to look at it from this standpoint, Mike. There are products being carried on TV3 right now that don't reach the whole country. It's not just the pay television.
But it's not the rugby, though, is it, Nate?
It's not the rugby, but TV3 very well could have secured the rugby, and then it would have been.
And we might well be having the same discussion with them. This business from Alistair Carthew a few moments ago about TVNZ getting delayed coverage of domestic tests 1 hour after kick-off.
Right.
From your point of view, that doesn't seem a very good deal, does it? I'll flick over halfway through the game. You've lost me.
Well, I think there's two answers to that. First of all, I think it was important for us to do that based on our previous conversation about our reach. Number two, our goal has always been to bring live sport first and foremost to New Zealand, and the ability to bring all black games exclusively live is very important to us.
Quick one on the Warriors. When will we know whether you have Warriors games?
We hope to have that resolved within the week.
Do you have it or not? I mean, when we say when you have the Warriors game, you confident?
Oh, well, absolutely, we're confident. We're just trying to work through the details.
So we can say that you have got the Warriors games?
Well, you can't say that quite yet.
Could I suggest that?
You can suggest it.
What would you say?
I would say we're confident that within the week we'll have this resolved.
Good on you. Nate Smith, the Chief Executive of Sky TV, 8:26.
Queensland Premier Wayne Goss is holding out against calls for him to speed his own execution by recalling Parliament before the announced date of March the 5th. The Queensland Labour Premier has served notice yesterday when Liz Cunningham, an independent member for the State Parliament, who holds the balance of power in the 89-seat House, announced she would side with the Conservative coalition opposition on supply bills and confidence motions. To tell us more, we're joined now by Brisbane correspondent Sally Dillon. Sally, why is Wayne Goss dragging the feet on changing power, handing over?
Well, I think with the federal election coming up on March the 2nd, obviously he's trying to just hang on until after that. However, he has now said that it looks like the writs from the Electoral Commission on the Mundingburra by-election, which was held last weekend, could be returned as early as Thursday. And he has said that as soon as they are returned, he'll go to the Governor-General and advise her of what's going to happen. So Parliament could be recalled as early as the end of this week.
So there's no suggestion that he might be trying to still, in the last few days of administration, try and push through some policies that have proved unpopular or otherwise?
No, he has promised that he won't do that. He said he won't make any appointments or push through any policies before he goes and tenders his resignation.
What's the future for Wayne Goss? Is the Labour Party in Queensland forgiving about losing leaders?
I think he's on the way out. Most people seem to think that his time of power is well and truly over. He might hang around for a couple of years, but I don't think he'll ever be Premier again, at least.
What's going to be the hallmark, the characteristic of the new state government there?
Well, they're promising stable government. We haven't had that for a while because, I mean, the Goss government only won by one seat at the elections in July. And before that, you had sort of 3 months of electioneering, and then there were a couple of months of uncertainty while they debated the Mundingburra seat. And then there was another few months of electioneering before the Mundingburra by-election. So we've really had a year of not really knowing what's going on. So they're promising stable government. Of course, with small business, they're promising to get that on its feet again. I think just a breath of fresh air.
And finally, is there any effect being seen on the federal election campaign from what's happened in Queensland?
Well, all the federal bigwigs are saying it shouldn't really have an effect. However, in Queensland, the Labor Party has 7 seats with margins under 4%, and now 3 of them are up on the north coast, which is where the battle for Mundingburra was fought. So they are on shaky ground because the public of Queensland has rejected the ALP fairly strongly, both at last elections and in this latest by-election.
Thank you. That's Brisbane correspondent Sally Dillon, 8:28.
As the gallery's Anna Hughes was telling us earlier on in the program this morning, the government is setting the scene for proposed tax cuts and social spending increases today with their pre-budget document. This is part of the Fiscal Responsibility Act that Ruth Richardson left the country with. What to expect? Our economics correspondent Bronwyn Evans is with us. Bronwyn, what is Bill Birch actually going to tell us today?
Well, I'm pretty sure he'll be telling us that, of course, the economy is doing very well under his tutelage. That's normally what we get on these occasions. But more than that, he'll be putting a little bit more detail in terms of what the government's going to be spending in the forthcoming budget, which will be coming up in May or June.
So numbers as opposed to intentions?
Yes, he will be giving some information about numbers. The most important numbers, however, do come out in December. The government comes out with its December economic update, in which case it puts forecasts and also spending and tax cut numbers. And we've got some very big numbers back in December, you might recall. $3.5 billion being spent over the next 3 years, $1.7 billion coming up in this coming budget. In the statement in December, they mentioned that there was provision for initiatives under development, including family assistance, education, New Zealand superannuation, and another category called other. Now, we'd expect Bill Birch to put a little bit of flesh on those bones and tell us...
How much is in the other? Is this big money we're talking about?
$40 million in the other, about $300 million in those other initiatives.
Why isn't he telling us about the tax cuts themselves today?
Well, it is a very good point. And originally, back in December, Bill Birch indicated that he would be talking about the tax cut details today, but they decided to put it off till next Monday. The official reason given is that it's going to be too much information, too difficult for the financial journalists and gallery journalists to digest, but I don't think many of us really accept that. The real reason is presumably that they want to put a few bells and whistles on it and get as much mileage as possible.
As you've been reporting this morning, he doesn't actually fiscally have much room to move, does he? He's already committed many hundreds of millions of dollars to tax cuts within the GDP figure and the numbers that he wanted below 30%. He can't move.
Yes, well, the government has set itself a target of only having tax cuts at the time when debt falls to below 30% of gross domestic product or GDP. Now, we're pretty much on that target. They're very, very close to that target. So, in theory, the government can't spend hundreds of millions of dollars on extra initiatives. However, we must remember this is election year, and a lot of people will be watching closely to see whether the government can, in fact, resist the temptation to reach into the pork barrel and throw around a little bit of extra lolly.
Thanks for your time, Bronwyn Evans, economics correspondent.
Coming up before 9 o'clock, we'll bring you more news on the missing rescue helicopter from Mount Hutt. We'll talk about the row about bare buttocks near an Auckland church. The axe goes through 25 school bus services in Dunedin. We hope to talk to the Ministry of Education. And, of course, cricket and politics in India. But first, the news with Catriona McCleod.
Good morning. Low fog's causing problems for rescue crews in the search for a missing helicopter and its two-man crew in Canterbury. The Mount Hutt rescue chopper went missing around 10:30 last night when it was sent out to pick up 4 stranded trampers in the Rakaya Gorge. Rescue coordinator Tony McCleod says they've got both air and ground crews standing by, but they're waiting for low fog to lift. He says they've declared the area a no-fly zone for all aircraft other than rescue teams. Meanwhile, police say a group of trampers couldn't aid a couple who died yesterday after being swept away while crossing a river in Arthur's Pass National Park. Police officer Neil Shepherd has told the programme that the trampers were 75 metres away, and although they ran to get aid from a nearby bulldozer, the help came too late. There are mixed feelings from the Prime Minister over Sky TV securing the rights to broadcast live rugby. In a 3-year deal announced yesterday, Sky will screen All Black Test rugby live, while TVNZ will have delayed coverage. The deal's prompted outrage in many rugby fans. Jim Bolger says the rugby union gambled on the deal on how much rugby would be shown on free-to-air television and has only been partly successful.
I was hopeful, frankly, and I would have thought it would have been wise for both Sky and for television and for the rugby union to have at least the New Zealand test matches all go live. I can't quite see the purpose of this 1-hour delay.
TVNZ spokesperson Alistair Carthew has told Morning Report he doesn't believe the deal will hurt the company and TVNZ could simply not afford the package. The chief executive of the Sky Network, Nate Smith, expects the agreement to bring the company up to an extra 15,000 subscribers a year. A Northland helicopter firm is being prosecuted by the Ministry of Agriculture in connection with an incident last year in which landowners claim trees and bushes were damaged by hormone spray. Residents near Waitira, south of Whangarei, say that in July 9,000 young pines and native bush were damaged when a helicopter sprayed nearby paddocks with 2,4,5-D. People living on the land say they also became ill. A man who died after a fall at the Auckland casino this morning was being escorted from the gaming floor by security staff. Police say the 29-year-old man fell approximately 8 metres after hopping onto an escalator banister, overbalancing and falling to the ground. Inspector Rod Drummond says video footage has shown there was no physical contact between the man and the security officer. State Highway 1 has been closed at Oakley, just south of Whangarei, following a fatal accident. A truck driver died in the head-on crash with a tanker and trailer. And finally, Tim Shadbolt is back. The controversial former mayor of Invercargill is returning to the city to run a second-hand goods store. Graham Caird of A1 House Demolitions says Mr Shadbolt will run a new subdivision of his company, Clyde Traders, which will deal in everything from second-hand machinery to household items. Mr Shadbolt begins his new job tomorrow. And that's the news.
Bobby Short has been entertaining New Yorkers at the Café Carlyle since 1968. His latest album, Songs of New York, was recorded live at the cafe, and for the occasion he unearthed a number of little-known or forgotten songs, which he presents in his own inimitable style, backed by a quintet of instrumentalists including cornetist Warren Bachet. Hear a selection of these songs on Change of Pace this Saturday afternoon at 5:30 here on National Radio.
Now look at the weather around the country today. In Kaitaia, some morning rain, light winds 25. For Pahia and Russell, mostly cloudy, little wind 26. In Dargaville, some morning rain, light winds 26. Whangarei, mostly cloudy, light winds and 26. In Auckland, patchy morning rain, light winds and 26. For Tauranga, some morning drizzle, light winds and 25. In Hamilton, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 26. Taumaranui, morning drizzle clearing, little wind and 27. Rotorua, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 24. Tokoroa, morning drizzle clearing, light winds and 25. In Taupo, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 25. In New Plymouth, cloudy periods, westerlies and 23. In Gisborne, fine, afternoon sea breezes, 27. Napier and Hastings also fine and afternoon sea breezes, 26. Dannevirke, fine with light winds and 25. Masterton, fine and 27. Wanganui, morning drizzle clearing, little wind and 25. In Palmerston North, mostly cloudy, light winds and 26. Levin, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 25. Paraparaumu, cloudy with morning drizzle, light winds and 24. In Wellington, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes and 23. In Motueka, cloud clearing, afternoon sea breezes and 25. In Nelson, cloud breaking, sea breezes 24. Westport, some rain, light winds and 23. In Blenheim, fine with light winds and 26. For Kaikoura, some morning cloud, light winds and 22. In Christchurch, cloud clearing, light winds and 22. For Dunedin, cloudy at times, northeast breezes and 19. In Ashburton, some morning cloud, then fine, light winds and 23. In Timaru, becoming fine, little wind and 21. Oamaru, cloud clearing, northeast breezes 20. For Greymouth and Hokitika, some rain, light winds and 21. In Alexandra, cloud clearing, light winds and 26. For Queenstown, cloud clearing, light winds and 20. For Gore, some morning cloud, then fine, northwest winds and 20. And in Invercargill, cloudy periods, light winds and 20 degrees. It's 22 minutes to 9.
Thank you, Catriona. And now with more sport and probably cricket, Kent Caddick.
Good morning. New Zealand cricket officials are at a loss to know why they weren't invited to a critical meeting at the World Cup in Calcutta yesterday. The meeting, involving the 11 other competing nations, voted 6-5 in favour of stripping Australia and the West Indies of 2 points for refusing to play in Sri Lanka. Radio New Zealand sports cricket commentator Brian Waddle asked New Zealand team manager Green Alabaster if it could be construed that New Zealand's lack of attendance mean they weren't interested.
New Zealand were very interested. In fact, I attended the meeting on the Saturday when this matter was first discussed, and I was most interested in the way the decision-making process took place, and I played, I think, a reasonably significant part in the process. It was therefore, you could imagine, a great surprise to me when the meeting was reconvened on the Sunday morning at 7:30, and I was never invited, and didn't discover till after midday that the meeting had actually taken place. Do you know the reason why you weren't invited? I have no idea why I wasn't invited. I'm attempting to find out why. I also know that England were not invited, and it was only by chance that they found out the meeting was on and attended it.
You could hardly make the decision then a fair one in terms of the voting process. They've decided that 2 points will go to Sri Lanka, but really it's not a democratic process if you haven't been invited. If you didn't want to go, that's a different story. Yes. It obviously, in my mind, it's not valid. If all the participating countries were not invited and were actually present in the city, then it's not valid. I can't reveal at this stage whether I would have voted for or against, because I wasn't there to hear the argument. Is the matter still hot and alive, or is it dead now and everybody's saying, let's get on with the tournament?
Oh, I think everybody's saying, let's get on with the tournament. We have to do that. We're only 2 days away from the first game, and there's no point in prolonging these matters any longer. It was getting to crisis point on Sunday when a final decision hadn't been taken, and there was anxiety throughout the teams as to whether, in fact, the World Cup would take place as expected.
The overriding issue hasn't been really settled, though, has it? Which is probably the sad thing, the fact that Australia and West Indies concerns are still very much evident, aren't they?
Yes, they are. I think the thing that was decided at the meeting, and which affects the rest of this World Cup, is that if any other team, subsequent to the actions of Australia and the West Indies, takes a similar action, then the decision has been taken that they will lose their points or lose the match. So, for example, if it got to the quarterfinals and there was some situation developed where one team said we're not playing and the other team says yes we are prepared to play, well then the team that didn't wish to play would not go on in the competition.
And are you pursuing the matter with the ICC in terms of the fact that New Zealand was neglected, or they neglected to advise New Zealand that they were conducting a meeting?
Well, New Zealand Cricket are investigating, and I'm quite certain will strongly make representations to the ICC for an explanation. And I am personally, while over here, attempting to find out why New Zealand were not invited. It's not so much a personal thing about me not being invited, but it was New Zealand were not invited.
It seems a little bit of an insult almost to New Zealand from whoever organised the meeting.
Well, if one takes the magnanimous view, one says, well, maybe it was an oversight. But it seems to me to have been a very critical oversight, and one that is not becoming of people who are organising such an important event.
It's New Zealand cricket team manager Green Alabaster talking to Brian Wadlon. That's the latest from sport.
Have a good day, Kent. 18-9. Low fog is causing problems for rescue crews searching for the rescue helicopter missing in Canterbury. We've been telling you about this throughout the morning. The Mount Hutt helicopter has not been heard from since 10:30 last night when it went to pick up 4 stranded trampers in the Rakaya Gorge. The coordinator, Tony McCleod, is with us. Morning, Tony.
Morning, Mike.
The forecast, is the fog forecast to lift?
Yeah, it's clearing in the area now, and the Air Force Iroquois has been airborne for about half an hour.
You've got one in the air. Have you got people on the ground looking as well?
Yes, there's about half a dozen ground search teams in the area also.
Do you have a fairly specific area?
Not specific, but the general search area isn't big because the place that he was going to uplift the people is not a great distance from his home base.
So let's just get this clear. He knew where he was going?
Yes.
He wasn't looking for the 4 stranded trampers?
No, they were four people who were trapped on a bit of an island in the Rakaya River, near the Rakaya River Bridge on State Highway 1. And everybody knew exactly where they were. They were being watched by police officers from the bridge.
So they got out anyway last night?
The Air Force Iroquois lifted them out. It was tasked after the rescue helicopter failed to arrive. The Air Force lifted them out, and then the Air Force conducted about a 2-hour search last night without any joy for the missing helicopter.
So do you have any idea of where the path of the rescue helicopter itself?
They don't lodge flight plans or that sort of thing for this sort of operation, but we suspect he was probably going to follow the river down from the Mount Hutt area to the bridge.
So it would be reasonable to suggest it will not be a big problem finding it?
We would hope not, but we certainly haven't had any joy as yet.
Do copters have locator beacons?
They do. There isn't one activating on this occasion.
Thanks for your time. Rescue Coordinator Tony McCleod, 16-9.
A controversial billboard in Auckland, which displays a man's bare buttocks, is being moved, but not because of protests. The advertisement promotes safe sex and is being run in association with Auckland's Gay and Lesbian Hero Festival. But local churchgoers who found the billboard offensive vandalised it, and now it's being moved. Sasha Hardy has the report.
The Auckland City Council has demanded the billboard be moved, not because of its content, but because it's in a residential zone. The Ponsonby billboard, which carries a message to practice safe sex and homosexual relationships, angered nearby churchgoers who ripped off the offending portion of the display. The minister of the St John's Methodist Church, Paulo Enrico, says he asked the owners of the billboard to move it before his church service on Sunday. He says it was agreed that the offending buttocks would be covered, but he says come Sunday morning nothing had been done, so he took the law into his own hands. Paulo Enrico says he began with attempts to paint over the display.
But unfortunately the paint was not able to stick. So we decided to rip it off, to rip what we could off the sign.
Paulo Enrico says he's upset the church wasn't consulted before the billboard was erected. He says he's offended by the naked bottom in the advertisement, not by homosexuality.
The gay community comes into our church and attends church services, becomes a member of the church. As as we do in the Samoan society, we're quite happy with that. We have nothing against the gay community.
OG Advertising own the billboard. Their spokesperson, Gordon Freiberg, says while the ad was not intended to be offensive, there's no excuse for blatant vandalism, and OG will be considering legal action against the church for the $2,000 worth of damage. Minister Paulo Arico says regardless of possible legal action, he doesn't regret defacing the advertisement.
I'm quite prepared to, if the court says you got to pay compensation for the action, then we're quite prepared to do that. That's not saying that we regret what we have done.
Meanwhile, the billboard will be moved into a commercially zoned section of Ponsonby Road. In Auckland for Morning Report, Sasha Hardy.
Well, to discuss that issue, Hero Project Director Scott Johnston joins us now. Good morning.
Good morning.
Were you aware the billboard was going to be put up next to the church?
No, we don't have any control on where the billboard goes. That's with the advertising agency. So they actually pick the sites.
If you've been aware of possible objections by groups, would you have tried to have it shifted or perhaps not put there?
If the church had come to us, the church never came to us at all. They might have gone to OG, but they never approached Hero. If they'd come to us and said, look, this is causing our congregation some concerns, we would probably have considered moving it. But we've had no approaches from the church whatsoever.
You say probably would have?
Yeah, we would have. Yes, we would have. The billboard should be on Ponsonby Road because it's targeting gay men, and that's where gay men primarily live. So we need it close to that area. The billboard was actually located 150 yards across the road for about 6 weeks. The church never objected to it during that period.
Do you have any concerns about the defacement and what this possibly means for the message that you were trying to put across?
Well, absolutely. The message is a safe sex advert. It's trying to stop HIV infection. Now, there are numerous examples of billboards that have bare buttocks on them. I could cite you 3 examples of that. We see the Gold Tops naked man walking along the street on TV. He's been around city all the time. Now, the church hasn't made any objections to that. I actually do think the church may have some concerns about homosexuality because the Reverend Paulo actually said that on the Herald that we shouldn't be taking homosexuality out on the streets. But
you hear him there in that report just before you came on air, him saying if gay people come into our church, they're welcome like anybody else.
Well, his comments are inconsistent then.
Well, what do you believe? Do you accept his word as you've just heard them?
Well, he said 2 different things. So we're actually going to meet with him this afternoon and sit down and discuss all the issues. I'd like to know actually what he really thinks on that issue.
Well, what do you hope will come out of that meeting?
Well, we're asking for him to fully recompense our costs with the billboard, which amount to about $3,000. If they're not prepared to do that, we may consider laying a complaint with the police because it's willful damage, it's a criminal action. We'll also consider the Small Claims Tribunal, and maybe the Human Rights Commission might be looking into this as well.
It's rather petty to take it to that extent, isn't it?
Well, I think this is a serious issue regarding safe sex. Now, if the church are going to rip a billboard down every time we promote safe sex in Ponsonby Road, it's a big issue.
All right, thank you very much for your time. That's Hero Project Director Scott Johnston. It's 11 minutes to 9.
The Ministry of Education policy to not provide school buses where there's a public transport alternative means 25 bus services from Dunedin to surrounding townships are to be phased out. From the Ministry, Michael Deaker joins us. Good morning.
Good morning, Mike.
How many people are affected?
About 1,280 students are currently on these services.
How many schools?
14 secondary schools, a couple of primaries.
So for people outside of Dunedin, what are we talking? Dunedin to
Mosgiel, or Dunedin to Port Chalmers, Dunedin to Waldronville, Brighton, down the south coast, Mike.
This is consistent with policy around the rest of the country?
It is. It's probably the biggest anomaly in New Zealand, I think, this Dunedin area. I think on your own program we covered the Whangaparoa Peninsula north of Auckland. That was brought into consistency with the rest of the country. Then there was the Paikokariki coast, the Kapiti area, and now it's that was a school bus going past. Then there was the Dunedin area, which we just dealt with too.
Why do you regard providing school buses as an anomaly?
No, this is an anomaly with government policy. We want consistency and fairness across New Zealand, Mike. And in this case, we had 800 or 900 of the students currently on these services are in fact going past their nearest school. They have no distance eligibility. They're not more than 4.8 k's from the nearest school. And besides, they're on public passenger services. Now, of course, there are thousands of kids throughout Dunedin City who routinely catch a public bus to school. Here was a very large number, 800 or 900, who had their choice of any school in the city and taken to it free.
They now face increased costs, don't they?
Yes, they will, but we've brought in a big transition package to make that easier for the parents concerned. We realise that an abrupt change on June the 28th, the end of term 2, would be unreasonable and might lead to practices which would not be safe. So we've put in over $800,000 right through to 1999 to enable the schools to assist the students in the ways they see best, and the parents too.
Sorry, you said 1999?
That's right. That's when the phase-out finishes.
All right.
The decision's active as of June this year, but we have this money in to ease the process through for a number of years.
What does that actually mean to a parent or a pupil, a transitional fund? Do I get half my bus ticket paid for?
That'll be up to the schools and the parents to decide. I know they've started that talking process already. I briefed the schools yesterday about it. They're going to be meeting over the next few weeks to decide the best and fairest ways of using the money available to them. They may decide to charter their own buses, and there's a very competitive bus industry in Dunedin. They may decide to buy concession tickets for the kids. And, for example, Mike, from Mosgiel to Dunedin, I understand the current concession fare is about $18.90 per week for 10 trips. There's a whole range of options the schools may take to use the transition funding we're making available.
Thanks for your time, Michael Deaker from the Ministry of Education. Just gone 8 to 9.
And so to comment, which today comes from Arthur Feslier.
A couple of weeks ago, hundreds of people gathered for a 50th birthday, and there wasn't a bottle of bubbly in sight, for they are members of Alcoholics Anonymous, marking 50 years' work in New Zealand. AA is most efficient, downright practical and embracingly spiritual. Its amazing strength lies in its groups, local weekly gatherings of men and women who admit that they are alcoholics who need help to give up drinking. There are over 76,000 groups in 114 countries. AA's committee structure is starkly simple, and AA neither accepts nor solicits money from anyone other than its members. If the liquor industry were to send AA $1 million tomorrow, AA would politely return it on Thursday. What an exemplary contrast to other agencies which constantly and expensively trawl for money. AA's purpose is to help maintain permanent sobriety in each person who comes to it voluntarily. AA does not recruit. You're a member when you acknowledge that you're dependent on alcohol, go to a group meeting, and desire to stop drinking. Its success is built on 12 traditions and the 12 steps, which set guide ropes for each member to cling to. And what a probing and humbling lesson they are. Humbling but not humiliating. For instance, you make a list of everyone you've harmed and are willing to make amends. But most difficult, perhaps, is to agree that there's a power greater than yourself, God, if you like, but as you understand him, and let him remove your deficiencies. It's an AA tenet to cope with one day at a time, to avoid alcohol today, and when tomorrow comes, try again. It works, as hundreds proved at that dry birthday party.
And today's comment came from Arthur Feslier, a writer from Wellington. 5.5 minutes to 9, and so to India, where the country is in the midst of World Cup fever. Cricket in that country has always been popular. A short time ago, I spoke to our Delhi correspondent, Ranjan Gupta. He says it's now becoming even more popular. It's appealing to people from a wider range of social classes and regions, and is becoming more organised.
Cricket has moved into being a tremendous commercial sport in India. This wasn't the case just a few years ago, where it was a very sedate and sedentary game played with ease over a cup of tea. There are millions of dollars invested in commercial advertisements. There is tremendous financial stake. And perhaps after this World Cup, cricket is not going to be the same in India.
How easy is it to get tickets to the games? Are the games sold out?
Oh, yes, they're sold out. There's a tremendous trade in black marketing of tickets. A lot of people. Now, this, of course, there's a tremendous sociological change to cricket. One of the reasons why, of course, it was a more exclusive game was because it was, like much else in India, a middle-class phenomena. It was only the educated, the English-speaking who used to go to cricket. For the masses, it was football, hockey, and games like that, athletics. What has happened? All the commentaries used to be in English, never in an Indian language. That, of course, is changing now. There are commentaries in Hindi, the Indian national link language, English, of course, and a lot of regional languages. And the sort of people who go to and see cricket are people whose parents certainly went nowhere near a cricket field. But with that, of course, there is a mass appeal, and of course, it's getting very difficult to get tickets. There's millions, and people go looking for tickets months in advance, and they come from all over. People drive or come by bus or something, or train for a couple of 100 kilometers, which is quite usual. So tickets are difficult. Black marketeers are doing well, and there's a lot of gambling going on cricket by the side. People betting on who's going to win, and the stakes are high, and the gambling is done very seriously.
Well, you talk about cricket replacing politics as being one of the main topics in the news media at the moment, but certainly politics has its place in India with a rather large corruption scandal growing. Is that right?
There's been a lot of money apparently paid to politicians, and on the 22nd of February, the Supreme Court is going to hear some of the charges made by the Central Bureau of Investigation into these frauds and money taking by politicians. Now, there is fear that in case the Prime Minister's name is called or any strictures made, there's going to be a demand for his resignation. Now, the elections are at its best about somewhere at the end of April. There is speculation that in case the Prime Minister has an adverse reference to him, the elections might be called forward, and we might have an election involving millions of people by the middle of March. But of course, what it has brought into focus is the whole institutionalized system of political corruption. A man gets easy loans from government financial institutions, which helps him in turn to bid for projects which have been floated by the government, and he does this by bribing politicians, very often with the very same money that he's got from financial institutions. And this just goes to show the extent of corruption that's now prevalent in India.
Just how extensive is the scandal then? Is it likely to claim some high-profile political victims?
The people charged are the president of the BJP, who's a leading man, several members of Mr. Rao's cabinet, and including a junior minister who's been asked to be arrested and cannot apply for bail. So we have quite a variety of people, and all of them, of course, are turning against the Prime Minister for not having stopped the Central Bureau of Investigation, which is under him, from probing these ministers. But certainly a lot of heads are going to roll, and the big thing is what sort of an impact is it going to have on the elections? Does it mean that the ruling Congress party breaks up? What impact does it have on the opposition? One thing is certain, Indian politics is not going to be the same after this.
And that's Ranjan Gupta, our correspondent in India, speaking to me in between bouts of flu. And one of the topics we also had a quick discussion about was a growing environmental fight to save some rather pristine islands midway between India and the Maldives. And it looks like India's fledgling but growing environmental movement is going to have a win to save it from the hands of the developers. Coming up after 9 o'clock, Kim Hill, of course, and the bird this week is the P Waka Waka, the fanfare.